All right, someone mentioned a Mr. Ballin video. Okay, we'll do it. This one?
There are two elements of today's story that are bound to shock you. The first is just how could anyone allow
Put the
this
hat
to
on.
happen?
Yeah, you're right. Okay.
It's so awful. How could you do that? And then the second is just the severity of the punishment that was handed down for it. But before we get into today's story, if you're a fan of the
severity of the punishment. Okay, before we even get into it, he said the severity of the punishment. Is she black? Is she black? Yeah, she's black. Okay.
Strange, dark, and mysterious, delivered in
Sus.
story format, then you've come to the right place because that's all we do, and we upload once or twice every week. If that's of interest to you, please hold the like button at gunpoint and force them to walk through puddles in their socks. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. All right, let's get into today's story.
Yes. And dude, when we start, actually, dude, I should try to do that. So, spoiler alert, chat. Me and Elvis are going to be moving Alien Bacon to a podcast format, mostly because of time constraints and money constraints. We're going to be moving to a podcast format. I wonder if I could get him as a guest. I wonder if I could try to get Mr. Ballin as a guest. That'd be like the first person I'd try to get is Mr. Ballin.
In 2001, Greg Biggs was a 37-year-old self-employed bricklayer who was living in a homeless shelter in Fort Worth, Texas. He was also the father of one child. He had an 18-year-old son named Brandon who lived with Greg's ex-wife. Despite not living with his son while his son grew up, Greg had always made a point of spending lots of time with Brandon, and so over the years, they had become quite close. But besides his son, Greg really struggled to build meaningful long-term relationships with other people. It was like no matter how friendly and outgoing he was, people would just come into Greg's life and would leave very, very quickly. This made Greg, who always had struggled with his mental health, feel very isolated and lonely and desperate for human interaction. And so on the rare occasion where people did come into Greg's life, a new friend or a new love interest, he was always so excited to try to please them and keep them around that he would often go overboard with his generosity and his willingness to do things for these people to the point where he really set himself up for being taken advantage of. Case in point, 2 years earlier, a woman had kind of suddenly come into Greg's life, and Greg very quickly fell in love with her. And early on in their relationship, this woman tells Greg that she's struggling financially. And without any hesitation, Greg started giving her all of his money. Now, Greg was not a wealthy man, not by a long shot. And so before long, he had lived...
Dude, this is such a classic case of the manipulators manipulating the now, I wouldn't even call them weak. I would call them the kind. It's like my wife is such a huge example of this. She's so insanely nice to people. Like so insanely nice to everyone that a lot of times people take advantage of it. Like just to give an example, one time my wife got her hair done and this lady destroyed her hair. She burnt it literally, she left with like a fro. Like it was like destroyed. It was dried as shit. It was like burnt. She destroyed her hair because she like put too strong of bleach on it. And it was like awful. Like it was really bad. Like so terrible. Any person in the world would just complain about it or ask for their money back. Instead of asking for her money back or complaining about it, my wife ends up tipping her $20 anyway. She tipped her $20 because she felt bad that she fucked up her hair. It's not Pepega. Don't fucking call my wife Pepega. It was her being nice. It's not Pepega. She's just too nice, Chad. It has nothing to do with that. The thing is when you're nice, when you're like my wife, who is so insanely nice, it doesn't matter what you do to her. She'll feel like it's her fault. You know what I mean? Don't tell him I'm an idiot. You're not an idiot, Amy. That's what I'm telling them. I'm just telling them you're an extremely nice person where sometimes it hurts you, you know?
Literally given this woman all of his money to the point where Greg could no longer make truck payments. He couldn't make house payments. And so
that means she married you because she feels bad for you. I hate you. Banned. Just banned. Divorce. All right.
payments, he couldn't make house payments, and so his vehicle and his home were repossessed. And then after he's suddenly homeless and destitute, this woman who he's given all his money to, she also disappears. But despite being in this horrible situation of sudden homelessness, Greg made the best of it. Anytime Greg was not working, he would be trying to make plans with his son Brandon to go walk around the mall downtown or go see a cheap afternoon movie. Times were definitely tough for Greg, but Greg stayed positive. He was a forever optimist, and he did this by focusing
I wish
on
I
the
was
future.
like that.
He was certain if he could just land a few more good-paying gigs, he could make that extra cash and finally buy a home again and buy a vehicle again and finally kind of get his life back together. But unfortunately, he would never get that chance. On the morning of October 27th, 2001, two men called the Fort Worth Police Department to report having seen something suspicious on a park bench inside of Cobb Park. Cobb Park is this big public park with playgrounds and walking trails and fields. And at the time, Cobb Park was not considered a very safe place to be, especially after hours. There was lots of shady people in the park. So when the Fort Worth Police Department gets a call about something shady happening in Cobb Park, they aren't surprised. And so they dispatch a single detective to go over to the park and meet these two guys and see whatever suspicious thing is on this park bench. And so this detective, he goes over to the gates of Cobb Park, he meets these two guys, and they kind of explain what they saw. They give him directions to this bench, and then he thanks them. He hops back in his cruiser, he drives through the gates, and he starts driving down the trail, and then he pulls off and parks his cruiser, knowing that the bench in question is right around the corner, maybe 200 or 300 feet away. And so he parks his cruiser, he gets out, and he starts walking on this cement path, and as he's walking, he can't see the bench yet, but as he's walking, he sees there are deep tire tracks in the grass and mud off to the right side of the walking path. So he's mentally kind of taking note that somebody had been driving inside the park fairly recently off the trail. And so he keeps on walking and he begins to make that turn and he sees up ahead the bench in question and he can clearly see these deep tire tracks go right up to the bench. And then as he begins to make that turn and he's maybe 30 or 40 feet away, he can actually see what's on this bench and he can see this big lump that's kind of wrapped up in what looks like a rug or a blanket. And then as he gets closer and closer, he can finally see that very clearly there is a person inside of this blanket that's kind of laying out on this bench. And when he's about 10 or 15 feet away, he can see it's a man, and this man is clearly deceased. So this detective, he walks right over to the bench and he's looking down at this body, and he can see the right arm on this guy is very badly broken, and his right leg is also very badly broken. And then his left leg is not only broken, but it's been partially amputated. In fact, the left leg is barely hanging on. And so this detective, he's looking at this guy thinking, okay, this person must have gotten wrapped up in these shady criminal dealings that are known to take place in Cobb Park, and somebody beat him to death, or they beat him and then shot him to death. But as he's looking at the body, despite these extensive injuries, the bruising on his body was not consistent with someone who had been beaten.
Did he get ran over?
And in terms of potentially being shot to death, he began looking at the body, and from where he was standing, he could not see an entrance or an exit wound of a bullet. And so stumped, the detective steps back and is just kind of pondering what he's looking at when he realizes there's very little blood anywhere near the bench or on the body. And considering the left leg has been nearly amputated, you would think there would be lots and lots of blood, but there wasn't. And so that indicated to the detective that his injuries had to have been sustained elsewhere. And so this detective, he calls in backup, and more detectives show up, and they're all kind of looking at the scene, and the working theory became, okay, this guy got killed outside of the park. We don't know how he got killed. It looks like some sort of blunt force trauma, but somehow he gets killed outside of the park, and then his killers, they drive him into Cobb Park park, which is why you have those deep tire tracks on the right side of the path, and they dump him on this bench. Later that day, the medical examiner would come out and positively identify the body as belonging to Greg Biggs. The same day that Greg was found, the police went out and began their investigation, and they started by interviewing people that had been in Cobb Park either that day or in recent days, and they also interviewed known criminals that they knew went into Cobb Park, and they reviewed CCTV footage both in the park and outside of the park. But no one knew anything about what happened to Greg.
Interesting.
And the footage didn't show them
nice
anything
sweater, by the way.
interesting.
Thank you.
And so very quickly, Greg's case began to languish, and no one knew what to make of it. Then, in February of 2002, so roughly 4 months after Greg was found, the Fort Worth Police Department received a phone call. It was from this young woman named Miranda Daniel, and she said, "I know what happened to the man in Cobb Park." And the story she would tell them at first was so hard to believe that the Fort Worth Police Department weren't sure if this was a prank or not. But when they followed up on her lead and they went to a very specific address that she had mentioned, they realized she was telling the truth. This is the unbelievable true story of what happened to Greg Biggs. On the evening of October 25th, 2001, so 36 hours before Greg was found in Cobb Park, 25-year-old nurse's assistant Shantae Mallard arrived at her friend's apartment in Fort Worth, Texas. Her friend was named Titalisi Rice. She went by T-Fry. Shantae was from a very loving and stable household in Fort Worth, Texas. Her parents had raised her to be kind to other people and to always work hard and to stay out of trouble. And by and large, Shantae acted accordingly. But in her late teens and early 20s, Shantae began to secretly rebel against her parents. On the surface, when she was around her parents and her family, she was the goody two-shoes that always followed the rules. But when she was away from her family, specifically when she was with T-Fry, she would let her wild, rebellious side out. The two friends had met in 1999 at a nursing home where they both worked as nursing assistants. T-Fry had just gotten out of this very toxic marriage, and so when she met Shantae, she was actively looking for someone to go out and party with and go be free and meet other new people. And Shantae, when she's meeting T-Fry, she didn't necessarily know she wanted to do those things, but being around T-Fry, it was like this whole other side of life was opened up to her, and suddenly all she wanted was to go cut loose with T-Fry. And so very quickly, these two women really connected over their mutual desire to go have fun at any cost. And before long, they were not only drinking and doing drugs and partying on the weekends, but they were also getting high before work, which meant they were treating patients high. So with that in mind, fast forward back to...
I didn't know that. I thought, whoa, what the fuck? Getting high before treating patients? Come on.
October 25th, and Shantae has just arrived at T-Fry's apartment. And so Shantae, she goes up to T-Fry's apartment, and the two start drinking some alcohol, and they start smoking some weed, and they split an ecstasy pill. Ecstasy is a big party drug. It's kind of like a cross between being a stimulant and a...
Man, that looks like candy. I should try one.
Psychedelic. And so after these two women are fairly buzzed on these different substances and they're feeling ready to go, they leave T-Fry's apartment, they go down and they climb into Shantae's car. And Shantae drives the two of them to a local club called Joe's Big Bamboo. And so the plan was they were going to meet this guy named Cleet Jackson, who was Shantae's love interest. And the plan was they would hang out at the club with Cleet, and then at the end of the night, they would all leave, and Shantae and Cleet were going to...
Cleet Jackson, dude. That sounds like a... But what does that sound like? Cleet Jackson. Cletus.
To spend the night together.
His name is literally the name of a shoe. Cleet.
And so Shantae and T-Fry, they arrive in the parking lot of Joe's Big Bamboo. They park their car, they get out, and they meet up with Cleet, who was outside of the club. And the trio kind of sneak off from the rest of the people trying to get into the club, and they smoke some more marijuana. And then the trio, they go into the club, and they start having drinks.
Chad, this is a good representation that weed's bad.
And they're partying and they're dancing and they're having this great time. And then at some point in the night, Cleet kind of abandons Shantae and T-Fry, and he goes off with another woman he met that night in the club. And he would actually leave the club with this other woman, and he would vanish for the night. And so around 2 a.m., when the club is getting ready to close, Shantae realizes that Cleet, the guy she was going to go home with, he's gone now. And so she's very frustrated, but she doesn't really have any recourse. And so she instead just goes and finds T-Fry and says, hey, Shantae, let's just leave. And T-Fry, she's ready to leave too. And so the two women, they leave the club and they get out to Shantae's car, and both women are clearly under the influence. They're both definitely inebriated, but T-Fry believed she was less inebriated than Shantae was, and so she should drive. And so she told Shantae, get in the passenger seat. I'm going to drive. Shantae gets into the passenger seat.
You want to know my worst? Okay, this is awful. Like, this is just a bad timing to bring this up. The worst example of me drunk driving once when I was younger. My friend, we went to like a party, and it was like my friend's party. It was my friend's parents' party. It was like a, adult party. And I was like 18 or some shit, maybe 19, I forget. No, I was probably younger than that. I was probably like 17. But he drives a stick shift, like a slapstick, not like a full on truck, but like a car, like a stick shift. And he drove there, and he's like, I'm not really gonna drink. You could drink if you want. So I was just drinking just a little bit, not much. I was just drinking an okay amount. And then all of a sudden, he just like falls on me, and he is just plastered. Like he's plastered drunk. Like within like maybe 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes. And I'm like, what? I was like, I have been drinking. Why are you drunk? He's like, oh, he's like just slurring all over his words and shit. Thank you so much for the $5.
Walkie slide.
I appreciate it.
Birthday today and had blocked my toxic father a week ago. Feeling weird today and was hoping you'd give heart hands in support less than 3.
Heart? You want me to give you heart hands in support? There you go. There you go. The heart fingies. But anyway, happy birthday, by the way. Happy birthday. Thank you for the 5. God. So yeah, my friend's blacked out drunk, basically, slurred his words, falling over the place, and we're like 40 minutes from my house. So he had to teach me how to drive manual when he was drunk and I was pretty tipsy all the way back home. So he was trying to teach me how to do it. I pretty much had to figure it out myself. To be fair, I had a little bit of experience with like riding like 4-wheelers or dirt bikes with manual transmission. So I had a little bit of knowledge with manual transmission. But yeah, that was scary. That was scary.
T-Fry gets in the
I don't
driver's
recommend
seat,
it.
and she leaves the club, and she drives all the way back to her apartment. When she parks at her apartment, she gets out and says to Shantae, hey, I don't mind getting in my car and kind of trailing you as you drive back to your home to make sure you get home safe, kind of like an escort. And Shantae, she just gets out of the passenger side and walks right around and confidently sits in the driver's seat of her car and tells T-Fry, nope, I'm fine. I'm going to drive myself. I'll see you later. And then Shantae drove away. About an hour later, at 3:30 in the morning, T-Fry is in bed in her apartment when she gets this very frantic phone call from Shantae, who's totally hysterical. She's beside herself, and she's not really making any sense, but she's trying to get T-Fry to come over to her house. Now, T-Fry did attempt to figure out what was going on, but she just could not cut through the hysteria on the other side of the phone. And so eventually, T-Fry just thought, you know what? Clearly, it's something serious. I'm going to go see what's going on. And so T-Fry, she leaves her apartment, she gets in her car, and she drives over to Shantae's house. And when she gets there, she goes up to the front door, she opens it up, she walks inside, and she finds Shantae in the kitchen straight ahead. She's totally hysterical, she's crying, and she's telling T-Fry that she didn't mean to do it. She's so sorry. And T-Fry's telling her, hey, calm down, what's going on? And Shantae says, look in the garage. And so T-Fry, she walks straight ahead through the kitchen to the door in the kitchen that leads into Shantae's garage. And she opens the door up, she turns the light on, and in the middle of the garage is Shantae's car. It had been parked nose in and lodged head first in the windshield on the passenger side of this car was Greg Biggs. When Shantae had left T-Fry's house an hour earlier saying she was fine to drive, on her drive home, she had barreled into Greg, who was on the sidewalk of some street, and the impact was so hard that Greg went flying through the windshield and got lodged halfway inside of her car. But the impact didn't kill him. It did almost cut his left leg off and break several bones in his body, but it didn't kill him. In fact, there was blood spatter inside of the car on the passenger side that indicated Greg was totally conscious and was trying to pull himself back into the car. There were these handprints on the inside of the passenger side door indicating Greg had been pulling on them. There was also these very small droplets of blood all over.
No, that wasn't the actual picture.
Seat, indicating that Greg
back
had been
there with
spitting
the dude
up
in the car
blood as he was trying to talk to Shantae or as he was trying to plead for help. But Shantae, instead of stopping her car and getting this guy help, she just kept on driving home with Greg lodged in her front windshield. Now, keep in mind, where she hit him, she was less than a half mile from the fire station where her brother, her older brother, was currently on duty as a fireman. He was medically trained. He could have saved Greg's life. Also,
dude, this is why I fucking hate, like teenagers, or not even teenagers. This is another reason that I'm not going to go on a legalize all drugs rant right now, but I'm saying teenagers get so fucking terrified of like getting caught with being drunk driving and being on drugs and driving on drugs, and that the point where she literally would rather hide a body than just call the cops because she's scared that she was drunk and driving. That's why. Like, holy fuck. Oh my fucking God. That's insane.
So the other
this is like another case of, like, for example, if my son, when he grows up and he goes out partying, I'm going to like reiterate. I said like a billion times. I'm aware. I'm going to reiterate 100 times. If you're drunk and you're at a party, call me. I'll pick you up because I don't give a shit if you're drunk. You know what I mean? Because so many kids get in drunk driving accidents because they're too afraid to like call for help. They say, oh, I'm fine, I can handle it, you know, because they're too afraid to just call someone to give them a ride, especially call their parents, you know? Like, chat, if you grow up or if you are a parent, do that with your kid too. Make sure they are aware no matter what, they won't get in trouble. Because that fear of getting in trouble is like, for some weird reason, when you're a teenager and you have that fear of being in trouble, you would rather risk your life than get in trouble. You know what I mean? Because you don't really think about it that way.
Firemen at the firehouse that she knew, that Shantae knew, they could have saved Greg's life. Also, less than 6 miles away from the point of impact was the local hospital, where, of course, they could have saved Greg's life. And then, on her drive all the way back to her house with Greg...
She passes so many hospitals. I'm not defending her. How am I defending her? I'm not defending her at all. She's fucking dumb as shit. I'm saying she's afraid of, like, getting caught. You know what I mean? The fear of getting caught is like, I don't know why it's such like a huge deal for young kids.
Halfway in her windshield.
I mean, to be fair, I don't know how young these people are. They're probably more adults. They're probably in their 20s or some shit. But still.
Would have passed by 9 payphones where, if you don't know anything about payphones, you can dial 911, so emergency services, and it doesn't charge you anything. So Shantae at any one of these payphones could have called medical personnel who could have saved Greg. Also, let's not forget, Shantae was medically trained. She was a nurse's assistant and understood basic life-saving.
Oh my God.
She did not use any of those resources. Instead, she just drove home. And when she got to her home, she drove her car with Greg in it into her garage. She shut the garage door. She gets out.
Did no one see it? Did no one see the human hanging out of the windshield? No one? No one. Driving down the street, there's a dude kicking his legs out the window. He's fine. That guy's fine. Don't worry about it.
And as Greg is literally moaning and probably pleading for help at this point, she just says, "I'm sorry," and then walks up to the door that leads into the kitchen of her home. She turns off the light in the garage, walks into her kitchen, and shuts the door behind her, trapping Greg in the garage in total darkness by himself. Then, after an hour of Shantae just being in her house with Greg slowly dying in the garage, she calls T-Fry. T-Fry comes over, she looks in the garage, she sees Greg, and T-Fry's reaction is she just totally loses it. She panics, and she's screaming at Shantae, call 911, call paramedics, call the police. But Shantae refused. She didn't really give a reason, but she just said, no, I can't. And then shockingly, T-Fry also does not call anyone. The two of them just turn off the garage light again and shut the door and leave Greg. And they hop into T-Fry's car and they drive to T-Fry's apartment where they sleep for several hours. And then when they get up that morning...
How the fuck do you fall asleep when there's a human dying? How is that even possible? How can your mind shut off when there's literally a dude dying?
They go back over to Shantae's house and they check on Greg, who's now motionless. And at this point, Shantae, she calls Cleet Jackson, the guy who she was supposed to go home with at the club, but had abandoned her for some other girl.
See what I'm talking about, bro? Why are you implying that I ever once said anything about defending them in any sense? I've never once defended them. I don't know why you're acting like I was like, they're fine. It's not that big of a deal.
She calls him and says, hey, I have this huge problem. I need you to come help me. And so Cleet Jackson has no idea what he's walking into, but he goes to her house and he goes through her kitchen. She opens the door and he looks into the garage and he sees Greg in the window and he's furious with Shantae because now he's gotten involved and he doesn't really know if Greg's alive and he doesn't really know what to do because he's on parole. And if he gets wrapped up in this, he'll go back to jail. But he ultimately decides he's just going to help Shantae because he believes at this point Greg is dead. So there's nothing they can do to save Greg. And so that night, Cleet gets in touch with his cousin, Tyrone, and the two of them, they go into the garage and they lay out a carpet next to the car, and they both kind of awkwardly apologize to Greg, who's just stuck in the windowsill, and they yank him out, they put him into the carpet, they roll him up, they put him in the back of one of their cars, and they drive to Cobb Park, they go through the gates, they make their way over to that bench, and they drop him on the bench. There had been some discussion about maybe destroying the body, burning the body, but Cleet felt strongly that they need to put his body out somewhere in public so at least his family can identify him and bury him. After his body was placed in the park, Shantae told Cleet and Tyrone and T-Fry not to tell anyone, and they said they wouldn't. And within a week of Greg's body being discovered, Shantae was back at Joe's Big Bamboo partying it up as if nothing had ever happened. But eventually, T-Fry would tell a couple of her friends, and before long, word had gotten out. And one person found out about it that was kind of in the network of these people, this woman, Miranda Daniels, and she really didn't like Shantae. And so she was the one who actually called the police and turned her in. And when the Fort Worth police followed up on Miranda's tip, and they went to Shantae's house, they went into her garage, and there was her car with the windshield still obviously busted in from something being smashed through it. And there's blood all over the inside of the car, and there was some obvious attempts at trying to destroy evidence inside of the car. The seats had been taken out, some things had been burned, but none of the attempts Shantae had made had actually destroyed any of the evidence. During the trial, the medical examiner who had done the autopsy on Greg Biggs said his injuries would not have killed him right away. Now, he didn't know for sure how long he would have been alive, but he believed it could be as long as several hours or maybe even up to a whole day. And during that time, Greg was just trapped inside of this pitch black garage. No one's coming to help him, despite people coming in over and over again that he's pleading with to help him. And he would have been in excruciating pain. He's got several significant broken bones. His leg has been nearly amputated. He's got cuts all over his body. And he would have been trying to pull himself out of the windshield. And every movement he was making would have been sending the jagged pieces of metal and glass into his body. I mean, this is a drawn-out, horrible death. And during the trial, every single medical professional and every single law enforcement official said, had Shantae brought Greg to get medical attention at any point in the first couple of hours, just basic medical care,
he would
have lived. And
yeah.
so his death is entirely because of Shantae's absolute indifference. T-Fry would ultimately, in exchange for full immunity, testify against Shantae, and Shantae would ultimately be found guilty of murder of Greg Biggs, and she would be sentenced to 50 years in prison. She'll be eligible for parole in 2027.
In cause number 037152, D-Styled State of Texas versus Shantae Juan Mallard. Verdict form is to count 1. We, the jury, having found the defendant, Shantae Juan Mallard, guilty of the offense of murder, assess her punishment at confinement.
I don't fucking understand. Yeah, T-Fry does need punishment too. I agree. But, like, I don't understand, dude.
In the institutional division of the...
That's it? Bro, we've watched videos of murderers who've killed 5 people and they only get like 10 years. Like that's honestly like a very long sentence for something like this. We watched videos of people like cannibalizing people and they get out within like 8 years. You know? Like this is actually a very long sentence. Not even exaggerating.
The Texas Department of Criminal Justice for a period of 50 years.
As for Cleet Jackson,
that's white men. They always get out early. I mean, well, yeah, that's probably why, is because she is black. But I mean, she definitely deserved it. It just needs to be a little bit more evened out.
And his cousin Tyrone, they received 10 years and 9 years respectively for their role in the crime. During the victim impact statement portion of the trial, Brandon Biggs, Greg's son, he took the stand and he very eloquently told Shantae that he forgave her, and it seemed very genuine and it moved Shantae to tears. And then Brandon looked out at the audience where Shantae's family was and he said, you know, not only do I feel horrible for my family, but I feel bad for your family, Shantae, as well, because this crime has destroyed all of us. So that's going to do it, guys. If you...
Dude, they're too... Oh my God, he's so nice. Oh my God! They're so... Literally, these people are so nice. She murdered his father, and she's like... And he's like, I forgive you. Oh my God, they're so nice. It makes me even more angry. That video won't win the Make You Laugh challenge. Anthony, just get out of here. Just leave. Just fucking leave. Get out. I don't want you here.
If you got something out of today's episode and you haven't done this already, please hold the like button at gunpoint.
Anthony wins? No, he fucking doesn't. Should have fucking life in jail. Dude, okay, if you've watched my channel whatsoever, we have seen shit of literally people like torturing young, like 13-year-old girls, like many of them. Like torturing many 13-year-old girls, and then they only get 10 years. Like 50 years is good in comparison. You know what I mean? Like, I was expecting 20. I'm not going to lie. From what I've seen in the past, I was expecting 20. But, I mean, 50, that's good.
Now it's time to walk away. I hope you enjoyed your stay. Did you laugh or cry or maybe subscribe? I'll thank you either way. You know I will miss you. I hope you return. Tell your friend or your mother to get me more views.